Yes, it's time for The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour with us. Anne-Elisabeth MOUTET of the Sunday Telegraph. How are you?
I'm fine.
All right. Nice to see you. Nice to see Marc of the French news agency AFP, Franco-Syrian photojournalist Ammar RABBO. Thanks for coming in. And thank you as well to France 24's very own Leela JACINTO. The World This Week, where you can weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. Our hashtag TWTW. It's undoubtedly Europe's biggest crisis since the war in the Balkans, for many a return of the Cold War. Tuesday, as the West geared up for sanctions after world markets nosedived, the quote of the week coming from the Russian state residence outside of Moscow and the lips of one Vladimirovich Putin.
At the post-Soviet territory, there are a lot of uniforms that look similar to our uniforms. Go to a shop here in our country and you can buy any kind of uniform there.
Yes, the Russian president breaking a silence that he'd had ever since the overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych to say that those mysterious men in green that you're seeing all over the Crimean Peninsula, he's denying that they're Russian forces. Anne-Elisabeth MOUTET.
It's one of those great things about, the tradition in Tsarist and Soviet and contemporary Russia. You lie. You lie barefacedly. Everybody knows that you're lying. You keep at it because you're the strongest. And it's the absolute demonstration that this is the voice of a former KGB officer who says, well, I'll get away with it because I'm stronger and you're not. It's barefaced. It's things that we saw in the past. Khrushchev take to the UN. He lies.
Marc Bourley.
He lies, and people on his own propaganda channel start standing up to him. That was an interesting few developments this week. I agree totally. It's just the sort of regime. It seems interesting that he thinks he can really get away with it. He doesn't seem to get a lot of input coming in.
Hang on a second. You say he thinks he can get away with it, but we were speaking to our correspondent in Moscow, and Russians are backing him.
Yeah, because the Russians are watching the same TV he seems to be watching. Now, he's putting out the message, but he's watching it. He doesn't seem to be getting a lot of input from. There's all amounts of media, number of media running around on the Crimean Peninsula, and he doesn't seem to be paying any attention to what the rest of the world is looking at. He seems to be just feeding on his own loop. He's saying it, it's coming back at him, and I think he lives very hermetically within that, which is dangerous for anybody in power.
Does he need to pay attention?
I guess he does, but some people were talking that he's like playing chess. It seems more like playing poker, because he knows, Europe is going to do what? Send an army? Of course not. Do economic sanctions? I guess not. I think we are at the limit with what Obama announced, these few cosmetic sanctions. So why wouldn't he lie, and why wouldn't he do what he has in mind?
It is a tense situation, though. You do have NATO countries, including the Baltic states, which are very worried. How could this escalate a lot further?
It could escalate a lot further, and it's not just the Baltic states. It's it's the Nordic states, and there are also states that are not part of the EU, that are not NATO, like Kazakhstan. China has a 3,000-kilometer border with Russia. This has implications. We've been focusing, because events are happening so rapidly, on what's happening in Washington and in Brussels, but that entire region, this changes the dynamic of what's happening. What could Putin do? Angela Merkel said yesterday that the third option, because the EU has the staggered response, and the strongest response would be if Russia invades eastern Ukraine. As we have seen, there's nothing stopping Mr. Putin, and the lies are continuing. His representative at the UN said, for instance, yesterday, he said that they had no idea that the Crimean Parliament was going to vote to join the Russian Federation. There is no way Moscow didn't know that this vote was going into motion. What surprises me is that why are we taken by surprise in every step of the way. You know, if Moscow was aware, for instance, that this parliamentary vote was going on, I think when we step back, you know, is to look at like, what did Western intelligence agencies know? Was the information going to the right people at the right time? Why are we caught in such surprise?
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's not an EU country, and I tend to think he's just created enough facts on the ground that in the end, I think realistically what we can look at is Crimea being a de facto or actual titular part of Russia. There's nothing that is going to really stop that, and the markets seem to have assimilated that.
All right, and as Leela was saying, is it a case of today Crimea, tomorrow eastern Ukraine? Here's what Putin had to say at that very same press conference.
If we see that this lawlessness spreads to the eastern regions of Ukraine and the people there ask for our help, now considering the only legitimate president has already officially requested our assistance, then we believe we have the right to use all means at our disposal to protect these citizens.
How far will he go?
He's got no reason to stop. He knows that the Ukrainian army doesn't exist next to the Russian army, to whom, incidentally, the French are still selling gunboats as we speak. He knows that Europe doesn't have the will, the inclination, or the means to go and intervene, and Barack Obama has been eagerly sort of explaining that he would intervene nowhere for the past 6 years almost. So I think he's got free rein on this one. Does he get to Kiev? I think that gets very bloody. Does he sort of try and recarve the border in the Don Basin? That is a really dangerous thing, because I suspect he will come across. This could become very bloody. It's very obvious that Crimea, even though it's got a minority of people who would like to remain Ukrainian, they all remember that they were gifted by order of Khrushchev to the Soviet Republic of Ukraine in '54. This is very recent. It's an entirely different thing when you get to a nation that feels feels Ukrainian historically. Even though it was repopulated with Russians, that is something that has a continuity that doesn't belong so in the same way in Russian history. And in that respect, that he is perfectly capable of thinking he can get there. You were saying it's dangerous to be on a loop. That's where it becomes extremely dangerous, and there's no reason why he should stop. He has nothing in his experience.
No reason why he should stop. Nonetheless, the United States is stepping up its targeted sanctions of individuals close to the Kremlin.
Because that has worked so well with Iran.
If we, I mean, we're talking here about a standoff that's like a month old, but if we go a little bit further, we've been, I mean, Russians have been lying about Syria for the last 3 years. And for the last 3 years, we've been waving sanctions and war, and we're going to hit this and hit there, and nobody did nothing. So what better message to send to Vladimir Putin and to Mr. Lavrov to say, go ahead, we talk a lot, we do nothing.
All right. Nonetheless, even though there were some who had doubts before that Thursday summit in Brussels, there were the first start of sanctions on the part of the EU. We had to go further, were the words of Angela Merkel. Merkel, the woman touted as the one Western leader who still has Putin's ear, still, though, this Friday, treading very cautiously.
We have to learn from the past and learn from the wars and find ways and means of achieving these goals through peaceful methods, through diplomacy, by taking the right steps. We can only do that if we're united and make decisions together and understand each other and listen to each other.
Marc Bourleigh, if the glass is half empty, then you just listen to what Ammar just said about how the West will do nothing because the West has done nothing. But if the glass is half full, among those who are standing up to Putin, you say the EU is beginning to wake up.
Well, no, actually, I think the EU is sending messages. The stand that it's taking, it's not going to change anything. It's little more than a slap on the wrist, and they haven't even got to that point, really. I think there are two important things about Crimea, is that Putin himself is drawing a parallel with Kosovo, which of course became an independent state under Western tutelage. And he's saying, why can't he do this as well with a territory which has very deep roots with Russia? The other thing is that he seems to be taking a very military tack with this. And Crimea, with Russian bases there, can be logistically supplied fairly easily, and it's a very, very narrow entry to the rest of Ukraine. So in terms of defensibility, keeping that territory, I think there's an argument that he could just stop there, because going into eastern Ukraine, there are logistic problems in supply and defense. And I tend to think that with the Kosovo argument and the military argument, that we'd be looking more at a focus on Crimea than eastern Ukraine.
All right, and again, picking up on the issue of how far the West will go, earlier in the week, Anne-Elisabeth's newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, publishing a leaked memo from the British Prime Minister's office warning against financial sanctions against Russia. A reminder that oligarchs have pumped a lot of cash into France and the UK banks, and that's bought a lot of London real estate. Steve Bell's cartoon here in The Guardian, Barack Obama, we hate tyrants, and David Cameron on the other end, we love oligarchs. At the end of the day, Leela, JACINTO, it will be about money.
It will be about money. And if you go back to the EU measures, they are not even sanctions. And if you really go to examine what they achieved after 28 heads of state gathered in Brussels, scrapping visa talks that have been stop and go for years, and signing, the beginnings of an association agreement, which was already offered to Yanukovych before he was ousted, really not that much. This is not strong action at all.
All right, Russia's Gazprom scrapping its discount on Ukrainian natural gas this Friday, and again threatening to turn off the tap over unpaid bills. A row with Kiev over gas gave the whole continent the chills back in 2009. There you see the map of Europe and how that gas flows. Everyone is now again talking of a rethink on European energy policy. One editorial that caught our eye, the Wall Street Journal, even suggesting that thanks to shale oil and gas, the U.S. should step up to the plate and export part of its new hydrocarbons bonanza over to Europe. Anne-Elisabeth MOUTET, again, there could be a radical rethink on this.
There ought to be a radical rethink. I will observe that Britain certainly, unfortunately, having got used for the wrong reasons to having energy resources, decided to go and frack. The French still have ideological sort of misgivings and fears. And Monsieur Hollande has a fear that he will lose his green allies in the run-up to a series of elections if he allows fracking. But it would be the sensible thing to do. And there is a French minister right now, Arnaud Montebourg, the Minister for Industrial Recovery, who says that it is sensible. We should study the ways in which it can be done without ecological damage, rather than just hide ourselves behind fears and that haven't been demonstrated yet. But in terms of, do you want to be at the mercy of any foreign conflict, or do you want to stand on your own from an energy point of view? If you take the French side, we did this in 1974. In 1974, President Giscard d'Estaing decided to launch a very ambitious nuclear energy program, and today domestic energy in France is provided at 80% by a nuclear program.
Right, but this is medium long term. In the short term, though, if the Russians turn off the taps, there's a big argument over whether or not there'll be a boomerang effect, because there was in 2009. It did hurt the image of Russia, and Russia needs hard currency.
Yes, of course, the other people who are supplying us with gas are Qatar. So, it's the devil you know and the other devil you know. But I don't know, I don't think the Russians really care about image, and their view of image is the strong horse. It's a bit like bin Laden's. You want to follow the strong horse. You win, and vae victis, woe to the vanquished.
All right, Marc Bourlleigh, Anne-Elisabeth MOUTET mentioning Qatar. Of course, you could also say Algeria, where the French get natural gas. And there's a place where perhaps people would like to see that natural gas come from soon, Iran. So does this all strengthen Iran's hand?
Certainly distracts from what was the major geopolitical issue of the last few months. Now we're all looking very much elsewhere. That suits Iran to a degree. It sort of would feel like a lot of the diplomatic pressure is off. John Kerry won't be looking over the shoulder quite as much at what Iran is doing. But fundamentally, I don't think it changes a lot, no.
It doesn't change a lot? And what about over the nuclear negotiations? Does it mean that Russia will pull back in the fight to pressure Iran into signing a permanent deal?
No, Russia is obviously giving diplomatic protection to Iran, but it's it's a convenience that Russia has its own its own concerns about a nuclear-armed Iran. It's involved in the talks for its own interests. It's not going along under U.S. pressure or anything. Russia is at the table pursuing its own interests, and Iran is feeling the pressure of that.
All right, we're going to talk about Syria, which is the other part about this in a moment. But first, I want to say hello to Nicholas Rushworth in our Media Watch segment. And of course, this is the story that's buzzing.
It is, of course, the whole Russia-Ukraine crisis is big news. And the online buzz, of course, is all about this man, Vladimir Putin. That picture we've seen before over and over is Mr. Virile himself on the Russian steppes, you know, bracing his chest, baring his chest. And I don't know if you've seen this one. This is one I saw today of him. Completely in taking the Mickey of Barack Obama. There, Barack Obama looking out for the dear leader of Russia. And what does he get? A stone-faced message there. So some of the antics online are very much, this is very much two tribes go to war, isn't it? The leaders should fight it out for themselves in the street. And what some of the tweet pics there, you can see, we're in trouble. If it's a question of macho man, we see him there on the one side with all this virility, and what do we get on the other side? Obama on a bike. So the whole thrust of the debate is, well, he doesn't have what it takes. He's you're not going to be able to handle it. Whilst one reflection of that is this thing here. The American magazine Atlantic saying, no, it's not true. American weakness didn't encourage Putin to invade Ukraine. You know, he is actually doing the right things. And actually, Washington has pushed the borders of the East further to Moscow and is actually in a powerful position. So the American policy is working there.
All right, very briefly, give me a sample of the other stories that you're following for us.
Well, this is a buzz story in the Middle East a lot. There you can see about the transport minister of Iraq. His son was in Beirut. He was shopping around Beirut airport and he missed a plane. You do it, don't you? You kind of like, oh, well, I'll buy that and I'll go to do that. And
especially in Beirut.
And so he called ahead and said, send that plane back. Of course,
nice.
Yes, well, indeed, that happened. And what you can see, the Twitter buzz on that is significant. There you can see the two men, the son of the minister and his father, and the logo of the plane, the Middle East Airways plane, perhaps transcribed with the picture of the president.
Oh dear. Nicholas Rushworth, many thanks. There's more to come with you. Stay with us. The World This Week will continue right after the break.